Hello, Blenders, and welcome to episode number 248 of ReelBlend, a podcast that is ready for the year of Jonathan Majors. Starting with Ant-Man and the Wasp, Quantumania, and then continuing into all the other cool films that he's in, including Magazine Dreams and Creed 3. Did
you call it Quantum?
Quantumania?
Did I call it Quantumania?
Like an ant?
I didn't realize that the word Ant-Man is in Quantumania.
You're at, so okay. Yeah, I can't say or
Kevin may have seen.
We'll just point out that fact and we'll move on.
Yes, I saw Quantumania. I haven't seen Quantumania yet.
I hope it was good. On this week's show, we're going to discuss AMC's new ticket pricing. Sharper is a new thriller that stars Sebastian Stan and Julianne Moore that we're going to be talking about. And because of that movie, that's going to theaters and then eventually going to hit Apple TV Plus, we have director Benjamin Caron on the show. And this is a terrific conversation. He also, directed episodes of Sherlock with Benedict Cumberbatch. Boy, I'm all over the place today. And he did Andor, including the finale of the first season. And he gets into some specifics for that.
And The Crown.
Really great details.
Yes, I want to see a series on Sherlock Holmes starring Benjamin Button or whoever.
Me too.
I don't know who I was going to say. Well, his name is Benjamin Caron. I think that's what I was thinking about.
Oh, I see.
All right, as you can see, Jake Hamilton is not with us, so Gabe Kovac is sitting in the other chair. Hi, Gabe. How are you?
Happy to be here. I'm always here, but now I'm really here.
Now you're really.
You can't look away.
Fully here. And joining us as always, Kevin McCarthy of Fox 5 in Washington, D.C. Hello, Kev.
Hello, Sean. And I know this episode drops on Friday. So the day after this episode drops, Sean and I will be hanging out in D.C. If you are listening to this episode, go to Sean or my Instagram. Go to Sean's Instagram. Sean, give it real quick.
It is Sean_O'Connell 33.
Right. And you can go there. There'll be an RSVP link. Sean and I will be at AMC Tyson's 1:00, I believe,
on
Saturday the 11th. And come on by and we're going to do a little Q&A and Sean's going to sign some books for his new Spider-Man book. So we're very excited about that. But again, if you happen to be downloading this episode on Friday and you don't have any plans on Saturday, drop on by. We're going to be in one of the theaters at the mall. So very convenient, very easy to get to. And the parking there's a lot of parking. So,
and this is the DC, Maryland, Virginia area, but I also know some people from Philly that are coming down. And if you're in Delaware, come on down. Yeah. So the whole area, essentially. You have no excuse not to come and hang out with Kevin and I on Saturday the 11th. It's
going to be fun. And I mean, ReelBlend, last time we did a ReelBlend thing here in DC, because I consider this ReelBlend event because we're all here. Yeah. It's our show. But we did it at AMC Georgetown. So AMC's been great to us, obviously, over the years with things like this. So we're excited to. It's gonna be fun. Come join us. I mean, especially just to come say hi. And I know Sean had a great time at his last one last week at Charlotte, and a lot of ReelBlend listeners were showing up. So shout out to you guys.
And if any ReelBlend listeners want Sean to specifically sign the page where we're mentioned. Me and
Pop
Kev,
up?
Just open it up.
I could do that.
Just be like, hey, just right above our name.
Answering the acknowledgments.
Yeah.
Very true.
When you sign the books, do you sign them Pop or the Kid or just your Sean
Depends on
O'Connell?
his mood, I think.
All right. So actually, someone bought a copy at the Charlotte one and asked me to autograph it as the Kid.
Sean,
was really great.
What is your signature like? Do you do like the whole Sean O'Connell, or do you just do like S Connell? I mean, some people have like different ways. Like Tom Hanks, I think, does like T Hanks. How do you do yours?
Mine is really messy. And it's messy on purpose because who writes script? Like no one writes script or cursive anymore.
True.
So it usually ends up being a big cursive S and then nothing else. And then the O and the C are pretty prominent. And then it's a bunch of squiggle lines and then like 2 L's at the end of it kind of thing.
Okay. So you can tell what it is. It's just like one of those, like, I mean, I used to, when I was in school.
You put your jersey number next to it too?
I used to practice my signature when I was younger. I used to always like imagine what it would be like to sign something for somebody.
Yeah.
And I used to have like a whole thing where I would write the K and then put the EVIN inside the K. And I had a whole like, I've never had to use it, but
Kevin will sign your book as well too on Saturday.
We did.
It was Donovan, right? That we signed his poster.
I
remember having that thought. He handed it to me, and I went, "Wait, I have to make this look like I put some effort into this. And I was like, how do I had to think about it for a second.
Gabe just wrote wrap it up. That's all he didn't even put his autograph. He just wrote wrap it up. Yeah.
If you're watching us on YouTube, hello, thank you for joining us. Hello, Friday morning notification crew. So we really appreciate everybody who comes by and watches the show. But of course, everywhere you download podcasts and listen to us in an audio format, we appreciate anybody who checks out the show. Go to youtube.com/ReelBlend Podcast to check out the video element of it. Hit subscribe while you are there. And that way you guys will get a notification every time we drop a new interview. Don't forget ReelBlend Premium as well too, if you want to get a bonus episode of the show that drops on Mondays, in addition to a newsletter every other week, including this week. When you listen to the show this week, you will have a newsletter waiting for you in the email. Go to the description here for more information on how you can sign up. Before I throw it to Benjamin Caron, which I will do in a second, I want to mention an email that we received from somebody named Matt Sagrafina, who goes by Maddie Sags. Hold on, am I saying that? Yeah, that's his nickname apparently. And he asked a question that I wanted to answer, but like we're gonna have to do it in some other format because they say I've always been dying to know, since we are all in different areas of the United States, because he picked up on us watching us on the YouTube channel, how we all met and became friends and how the ReelBlend podcast came to be. And I feel like we talked about that like in the early days.
So
like,
what I'll point you to, this is a great plug, Sean.
Oh,
for $5, you can get access to our ReelBlend Premium subscription feed.
Okay.
And I believe the very first episode that we ever put up on the premium feed. Let me look right now.
Was the history of ReelBlend?
I believe we started with our origin story. The ReelBlend origin story. Yeah, ReelBlend Premium #1.
Oh, cool.
That is in there. Yeah.
All right. So there's a movie that's coming out to theaters in limited release, and it's called Sharper. And we want to put this on your radar because it's really great. And we're going to review it later on in the film in greater detail. But Benjamin Caron is the director of it. He didn't do the screenplay, but he has a terrific cast put together for this, including Sebastian Stan and John Lithgow and Julianne Moore. And so we wanted to have him on the show and discuss his new film. And so without further ado, this is Benjamin Caron talking about his new film, Sharper, in addition to the work that he's done, like I mentioned, on shows like Sherlock, The Crown, and of course, the first season of Andor. We're going to kick off. Benjamin, thank you so much for joining the ReelBlend podcast.
My pleasure.
We are, just to give you a little bit of a heads up, we are kind of a geek-friendly podcast where we get into the ins and outs of decision-making behind the productions. And all three of us are huge fans of this movie, and we do not intend to get into spoilers because it's one of those things that we went into it cold and appreciated it more for that reason. So we'll dance around stuff and try to get as specific as we can without ruining anything to the film.
I mean, it's the hardest part of answering any question is why. Because, I think, I'm not sure any of us really know. And I think I think there's a kind of, you make up reasons afterwards and hope it makes sense. And, and where it all comes from, fuck knows really.
Well, you might have an answer to this one. Because
so that's probably the most honest answer you're going to get the entire podcast.
When we got to the use of Don Henley's Dirty Laundry, I realized that was one of the best song choices you could have had, not just for the scene that is used in, but for the movie in general. And so in addition to the Clint Mansell score, which of course is fantastic, if you could just maybe explain a little bit of your choice to use that song and whether you had to maybe like fight to get the right Steve and use it.
So, Dirty Laundry by Don Henley. That is some track. I remember I'd like to say that's been on my playlist and it's been a sort of choice of mine to sort of get in my first feature film. The reality was I have this amazing music supervisor, Simon Astle, who, worked on Come On, the A24 film. He'd worked on Big Little Lies, and it was his job to sort of, feed me as much music as possible within the kind of the sort of tone and the mood and the sort of brief of what we were kind of going for Sharper. So I guess I was in Manhattan. We'd started pre-production, and it actually came via my editor. He sent me a kind of a Spotify link, and he was like, "Man, just listen to this. I reckon this could be really good for the Roundabout Bar with Max and Madeline." And I put it on my headphones, and it's one of those tracks where your head just starts going instantly, and then your foot starts going, and it's like it's just dirty and sexy, and it's like it's got all of kind of it just vibrates as a track. And I was like, man, this is great. Like, can we get away with this? And he was like, yeah, this like, and we're like two Brits, and he was like, this film is amazing. It's like, doesn't matter what music I put on this, it seems to work. Everything seems to stick. But he was like, this track is, it's just got it. And at that time, we just to give a backstory that we hadn't really. That moment of celebration in the film wasn't really a dance sequence. It was just a moment where they sort of got together and celebrated with some money. And I was like, no, we've got to make something more of this. We've got to sort of dial it up. And I previously, on some of my work on The Crown, found moments where dance was a kind of a great release and could sort of show something, more internal through our characters, whether it was like Diana dancing to an Elton John song, or Vanessa Kirby dancing to a song where she's sort of fallen in love. So I guess this was a moment where I was like, okay, we can really go to town on this with the track. So I sent it to Sebastian Stan. I was like, look, we've got this track. So you've got to get them on board. There's no point in them turning up and going, they're the ones that have got to be in front of the camera. They've got to dance to it. So you need to get their support, and get them buying into it. So I sent it to him. And I sent it to Julie at the same time. And he came back straight away and he was like, you fucking kidding me? This is like my number one favorite song of all time. And then he's like, have you got Don's permission? And then I was like...
That's always the question.
Well, yeah. And I was like, so I bluffed him. And I was like, yeah, we can use the track. We can use it. It's fine. Because I wasn't trying to misdirect him. I guess I sort of thought, well, Simon wouldn't have suggested if I didn't really have permission. So I thought, oh yeah, it's got to be fine. They don't normally send me tracks that I can't use. So then, and then Julianne came back and she was like, yeah, I love it. It's going to be great. So then we're like, okay, we've got the track, got the actors. Now I need to get a choreographer because, we need to sort of get something down, even though we want it to look natural and not choreographed. So, the line producer, Amy Herman, recommended Susan Stroman, who is this very famous New York choreographer, director. And I was like, no, there's no way that she's going to come in for a day and do this. But she was like, fuck yeah, it's Sebastian Stan, it's Julianne Moore, and it's Don Henley. So suddenly, in the space of kind of a few days, I had this great track. The actors were on board and we had the choreographer. And then I phoned Simon. I was like, Simon, the Don Henley track? Yeah, everything's cool with that. And he was like, well, the thing is, Ben, it's never been used in a movie before. But we're pretty sure we're pretty sure we'll get permission to use it. I was like, well, right, okay. Normally in my experience of a track not being used in the movie means that it's not possible to use. So, By the way, I've just told the actors, I've just got a choreographer, and we're going to shoot this next week in the bar. So, what do we need to do? And he's like, I think you should write a letter to Don. So, I was like, okay. So, dear Mr. Henley, my name is Benjamin Caron. And I really like your music. I'm making this movie. It's called Sharper. I've got da-da-da-da. And I was like, okay, signed, like proper letter, signed it, not email, in the post, off it went. And, I don't know, these things, it took a while. It took we'd finished the shoot. We were in the edit. We'd cut it together and I still hadn't heard. And I think he just didn't get to him, or maybe he was deliberating. Anyway, like right towards the very end of it, thankfully he said yes. And it was like a woohoo moment where, okay, thank God, because, had we used anything else in there, it just wouldn't have felt the same. So that's a very long story about Dirty Laundry, but you asked, so there you go.
To follow up really quick, did you have like a backup song in case he didn't come through with permission?
Yeah, we did. And none of them were right. None of them. You just were crying in sorrow and disappointment and bitterness. And So no, I mean, it just, it's like something hits. There's an alchemy that hits when you get, certainly when we shot it and we'd cut it together, it was like, and of course they were moving to it. They were lip syncing to it,
There's a reason that I brought it up to lead the interview. I mean, that scene has an
we're
impact.
going to unravel all of that, like heartbreaking. So yes, I mean, to be honest with you, most tracks, in this film, not all of them, but some of them actually, our first choices ended up being the ones that ended up, stayed in the film. So, Talking Heads, Slippery People, that was another thumping, brilliant track that was sort of like perfect for the introduction of Max. That track, because we listened to it so many times, you question yourself and you're like, oh, is it really the best track? And maybe we should try something else. So we had David Bowie, we did the Rolling Stones, we did sort of more oblique artists, and every time we'd sort of send we'd send a cut to a studio, they'd go back and go, the Slippery People track, you're not liking that? And he'd be like, oh, I don't know. And I could sort of hear them going, oh, no, but we really love that track. I really love that. So it was kind of a fun game, but you just need to feel that you are exhausting everything else. And then, the 11th hour, you go, okay, does anything beat it? No. Talking Heads, done.
Right.
Benjamin, one of the things that we started this show years ago, as Sean kind of mentioned at the beginning of the interview, the whole purpose of our show is we want to bring highlighting to the ideas of like what people do behind the scenes of filmmaking and just kind of the shot choices. Like we just had M. Night Shyamalan on last week, and just the decisions that people make in terms of narrative choices, selective focus, shooting on film versus digital. And like one of the things that we get into arguments on, or at least in our text thread, is how film versus digital, that debate. And you got Roger Deakins on one side, who's now shooting digitally, and Fincher. And then you have the people who are still shooting film. But this is your first major feature. And you were able to shoot 35, which is incredible. So I wanted to ask, because I remember we talked briefly about this in our TV interview earlier, about how you kind of like wrote them a letter to see if that would happen. So just your experience.
You can see a
of
pattern
that.
coming here, can't you? Okay.
I'm saying you wrote a lot of letters.
Get the typewriter out. Here we go.
Yeah. But
Dear Apple and A24, it has been a dream of mine since I was 8 years old.
Yeah, well, tell us that. Yeah, tell us like what was the letter? So like yeah.
I mean, okay, first of all, I've always wanted to make not from like when I was 8 years old, but probably like in my early 20s, I was like, okay, I sort of understood what a film director did, and I was like, started to think that maybe that might be a possibility, but it was really hard I was sort of working in television, I was working in documentaries and light entertainment, and I was sort of trying to make that crossover into film, but the two worlds felt really very separate, and the film world in the UK was relatively small. You sort of had Merchant Ivory, you had Working Title. It wasn't a big business, and it seemed that the same people were making those movies, and Hollywood and the films over there just felt like planets away, and certainly from I grew up in a pub in the West Midlands. And so the idea of being a film director was such a sort of, it wasn't even an idea. So this is a very long story about shooting film, but so when
this is the podcast to tell.
Okay. Yeah. So, but when I wasn't one of those directors that had like a Super 8 camera that was kind of running around going, making my first film when I was 8 years old. But what I did have is I had a film camera, a stills camera that because at school you could do. When you did your, we called it like GCSEs or A levels, as instead of doing sort of more in art, you could just do photography, and so I sort of saved up enough money, and I bought my first stills camera, which was this Nikon FM2, and I remember looking through the lens and something just going. There was just, I don't know, like just something that happened, a framing, a kind of connection with, I like this. It's something, I love the characters that I can photograph. I love the scenes that I can photograph. But what I loved more than anything was going into the dark room and turning the red light on. And then, no one could interrupt you, not even like your teachers. They could bang on the door, you're like, oh no, sorry, I've got the print out. You have to give it a few minutes, even though you might be like having a small, 40 winks, having a nap and stuff like that. So, but it was like that that very early romance with film was for me through stills and celluloid and, you know, the processing and the smell of chemicals. So I guess that had stayed with me from then and, you know, carried with me through, you know, my career. But at every opportunity I would come, you know, and it was all those opportunities were in sort of television drama. You know, you couldn't go, I want to shoot this on film, because they were already shooting it on digital, and it just wasn't
like Andor.
Yeah,
and,
Andor.
like those
like,
shows.
What you're going to shoot? No, that's not going to happen, Ben. You know, or The Crown. They'd already made that decision to shoot on digital, so those decisions just weren't available to me. Fast forward to Sharper, and then this was it. This is the moment where you can actually define the terms. And I thought, if I don't say it now, if I don't put a marker in the sand and shoot this on film, if I don't set a precedent for this, then in a few years' time, and I say I do want to do that, then you know, someone might turn around and go, well, you didn't shoot your first movie on film. Why do you want to do that now? So that was sort of part of my thinking, but also
that's awesome.
A kind of love of those films from the 70s and 80s, those character-driven movies, whether it be, you know, A Colour of Money, whether it be A Thomas Crown Affair, whether it be Clute, whether it be, you know, the Scorsese movies. All those were, you know, they were shot on film. And I just thought, if I wanted to kind of lean into that look and that feel of those movies, what better way than to, you know, put your arms around it and go, let's shoot this on film. And I guess, you know, there's nothing better, you know, than the sort of the happy accidents that happen with film. You know, I guess it's the, you know, the randomness of the grain, the way that it deals with the highlights and the lowlights, the way the sort of information in the darkness of the frames. I think that so much now we are still chasing the dream of making digital look like film, that why not, if you want to make something look like film, shoot it on film.
Yeah.
I think Kevin's going to ask you out on a date.
Yeah, that was
the
mic
most
drop.
ReelBlend answer that's ever been given.
Yeah, that was
no
beautiful.
idea how perfectly
beautiful.
you fit into this show. Like, you
And
don't
he wrote
understand.
free?
Yeah.
Are you free once a week
Yeah, host
to
our
record
show
with us?
Yeah, and he literally wrote a letter to Apple and A24, and they didn't give him any pushback, which is really kind of cool, you know.
Yeah, and that was and I got my knuckles rapped by the producers for that, because I should have sort of gone, hey, by the way, I'm going to write to, you know, I'm just going to ask about shooting on film. So, but I was, at that point, I was like, yeah, I'm in Manhattan. I'm here. I'm a movie director. I'm going to shoot this on film. I'm going to write to all, you know, Apple and A24, and I'm going to pour my heart out and tell you the story I've just told you now. And I sent this letter off. And then Eric Feig, the producer, called me up. He was like, Ben, great letter. Just tell me next time you're going to send that, okay? And I was like, yeah, okay, I'm sorry. But they, you know, to their credit, you know, Matt Dentler, Noah, Zach, you know, they were like, look, we don't want to upset the filmmaker. If he wants to shoot on film and it's going to cost the same, by all means, you know, on your head be it.
Wow.
Love it.
Every studio is about to start getting a lot of letters asking to shoot on film. Like, I feel bad for all the studios from now on. Ben, I'm grateful that I went into this movie cold. I knew I was going to be doing the junket, and I had the screener, and I thought, okay, well, I don't need to watch the trailer. I'll just press play. And I was really grateful because I got to kind of sort of organically discover what the film was about, and the surprises were even bigger since I didn't know what to expect going in. I watched the trailer after and was grateful that I hadn't seen it in advance, because there are a few beats in the trailer, not massive things, but there are just a couple of things I'm grateful that I didn't know going in. I don't want to say them out loud because I don't want to ruin it for anyone. I'm just sort of curious. This has got to be a hard movie to make a trailer for, because you don't really want to reveal anything, but you got to show people what it's about in some form or fashion. I'm just sort of curious, your perspective of a filmmaker, how tough it is to put this film into a 2-minute trailer without giving away anything that you don't want to give away.
Well, I asked them not to make a trailer.
Did you write a
How'd
letter
that
for
letter
too?
go by?
That didn't work. That one didn't work because of exactly that reason. I'm like, how are we gonna? And I understand. Look, you need to market a movie. You need to get it out there, and trailers. I'm sure get people who may not, see the movie, go and watch the movie. But I agree wholeheartedly with everything you've just said. I encourage anyone to come to this movie and know nothing about it, because I think that's what's sort of deliciously surprising about the film. And I try and do that generally when I go and watch films now anyway. I read reviews afterwards because I enjoy hearing what other people's perspectives are on that film. But before I go into it, I love going in completely blind. And so it was really challenging. And actually, it's funny, the first trailer they presented, I was really upset about, because actually it gave way too much away, and I was like, and I was like, no, we've got these secrets you've got to really, really preserve and hold on to, because if you just it's very easy to sort of tell someone a secret. It's like it's like a magic trick. I mean, some of the greatest magic tricks are, the technique behind them is kind of slightly rubbish, It's like, okay, it's just a piece of string, or it's a twin, or it's that, and you can just literally say it like that, and everyone's like, oh right, okay, is that it? So you're preserving the magic of this, the sort of the misdirection, and I was like, with Sharper, please can we hold on to that as much as possible? So they went away and they came back with that trailer, and yes, it does give away. It gives away a couple of little twists and turns in there, but it's sort of also, it's clever. It kind of leans into something that it wants you to feel and think. So it's not, ideally, as I said, I'd rather there be no trailer, or maybe, I tell you what, to your listeners, go away and see if you can make a trailer that is tantalizing and interesting, that sort of doesn't give anything away.
Interesting.
We always say, anytime we put forth a challenge to our listeners, they often come back with some pretty amazing stuff. So I would not be amazed.
They might send you one.
Yeah, no joke. I would not be surprised if some of our listeners actually took that challenge and tried to cut a trailer.
One of the things that I want to dive into with you is your composition of specific shots, because you can't watch 15 minutes of this movie without realizing that you are very deliberately setting up your actors, the action happening in your scenes, whether it be, there's this terrific shot of the character Sandra through a bookcase where only her face is framed through the light that's coming through. There's an amazing shot of Sebastian standing up in a window well, essentially, and his reflection comes across the table in John Lithgow's boardroom, and it's like sometimes you just catch your breath at the beauty that you're capturing. And I realize that there's a lot of thought that's going into how you are framing your action. And so just briefly, if you could, talk to me a bit about how you approach specific shots, because you're not wasting any time. You're not just capturing action to capture action.
Wow, that's really touching, by the way. That's very kind that's what you just said. It's really hard to sort of unpick this, because there's just a feeling sometimes when you are directing a scene that you are looking for a kind of tone or a mood or a feeling that is in sort of, is bubbling underneath what's sort of going on in the scene. And I guess maybe it sort of goes back to my love of photography and the love of the power of an image, and what are the sort of semiotics of an image, and what that secret language that we're sort of trying hard to convey to an audience without trying too hard to show that we are, doing that. So it's and that is also, by the way, something that I really try and blend in with the performances of your actors, because it's all very well coming to a scene with a kind of a pre-existing idea about this particular shot or this particular frame. And often that does happen. Charlotta and I had a lookbook of many, many frames that we had been inspired by, and not just films, but photography and art, and images that actually we had taken while going out on location recce. So this is sort of big bumper book of kind of images that you're sort of just constantly digesting and trying to kind of simplify. And I guess that was sort of one of the guiding principles for this film, was just always to simplify, to kind of boil down, to reduce down to the sort of the desire kind of mood and feeling of the scenes. And then you come to this, and then you turn up on the day and you have these brilliant actors, a stellar cast, and you want to be surprised by what they're going to do, and you don't necessarily want to sort of pin them down into a pre-existing idea. So that's when the sort of brilliant dance happens, and that's when the kind of the choreography between what you're trying to imbue with their sort of performance start to kind of meld together. And that's when, that's the alchemy. That's when the magic happens. And I love, I'm naturally quite mischievous, and I love playing on set, and I love playing with actors and, sort of pushing them and giving them what I call a permission to fail. And that just means taking them outside their comfort zone, and not just sort of, not necessarily just always what they've prepared either, like sort of pushing them towards places they hadn't really thought about, or sort of trying different ways of approaching the scene. So you have that you're kind of, that's the drama. And in many ways, that's what really matters in a movie, because that's what you as a viewer are going to lean into. Like, I love the fact that you've picked up on those shots. And of course that is music to my ears. Ultimately, if the drama isn't good enough, then none of those shots are really going to matter. And the one that you talked about there with Sebastian in the office, that was, that started about because, I guess we went to that location, and that location, by the way, they'd never shot there before, and it was it was on the table and then suddenly went off the table. It's a very famous law firm in New York. It's called White & Case, and they suddenly they got jitters because it was COVID. And then I was like, oh man, what are we going to do? You fall in love with the location, and they're like, and the location manager's like, oh God, they're like trying to show you other stuff. You're like, no, I want to go there. And they're saying no. I hate being told no. It's like the worst thing in the world. And, someone else can sort of dive into that. But it's like when someone says no, you're like, why not? And surely there must be a way of doing that. So then, this is such a round, I'm not even answering a question anymore. But anyway, I was like, okay, we're going to get into that. We're going to get into that office. So then I remembered one of my friends was a lawyer who worked in London. And I was like, do you know anyone at this company? He was like, no, but this person does. So I got in touch with them. And they were like, oh yeah, one of my best friends is a partner there. And I was like, right, I'm going to write a letter. So I wrote a letter to him, and he came through. He was like, yeah, sure. And I went back to the location man. I was like, he's going to make it work. He said yes. And he's like, are you sure? And he's like, yeah, and it's going to be free, and we're going to go in there. And then of course it sort of, it wasn't free, and they charged a huge amount of money, and we had to do an exclusive. I mean, they're lawyers, they stitched us up. Yeah. We had to do an exclusive screening for them, which happened a couple of weeks ago. But anyway, whatever it takes, we got back in there, because that room and those corridors and that particular location in sort of Midtown was timeless. It was near where Radio City was. Those those sort of big avenues, those sort of 60s style, 60s architecture was for me where, very wealthy people aren't down in the, downtown. What's that? The Wall Street. They're not down there anymore. They're in Midtown. They're in like these offices which are like empty, massive lateral offices which are empty because it just says wealth. So that was like the perfect location for me. And then you sort of bring John Lithgow and Sebastian there, and you play with them, and you're always sort of looking through the viewfinder, and it just. Those shots through the table, and I remember when John got up, the first time he got up, he stood up, and then the chair just naturally sort of rotated round, and you're like, okay, that's cool. It's just, I don't know what that means, but it means something, and I like it. So we'll run with that. And then I was like, Sebastian, just stand up, have a look around. And then, he just sort of walks around, and of course he just steps up onto the windowsill, and you're like, wow, that's amazing. That frame, that sort of power that gives, and you're like, I'll take it, I'll grab it. So those are like happy. I mean, I could lie to you and go, I had that image in my head, but these are kind of happy accidents that sort of happen when you're filming, that you have to kind of push and nudge and be open to, and a lot of them are rubbish and you have to discount, but you have to kind of go through that to find it.
Gotcha.
Well, we're being given 1 minute left. Yeah. So I want to ask you this real quick, because you mentioned something just now about magic and like magic tricks and kind of like filmmaking and illusions and things like that. And I remember when I was 8 years old, I watched Terminator 2 Judgment Day for the first time. And like, I remember sitting on my couch because I loved magic growing up as a kid, and I always wanted to know how tricks were done. And I remember looking at my mom and dad going, how did they do that? So I wanted to ask you, do you remember the first magic trick you saw as a filmmaker that lit that spark?
Yeah, I do. I made a film about him. He's called Tommy Cooper, and he was a British sort of comedian magician that would do magic tricks that would go wrong. And I found him incredibly funny, and he was actually a really, really good magician. But his particular kind of his shtick was magic that kind of went wrong and sort of comedy. And he was massive in the sort of 60s and 70s, and it used to run on television all the time. And like you, I was sort of 7, 8 years old, and I remember seeing that and going, wow, I love the sort of feeling that gave you when you sort of saw a magic trick. And I ended up, my dad brought me to London, and we went to this really small magic shop near Chancery Lane. It's closed now, and going in there and like sort of, buying that first magic trick, and it was like a sort of coin disappearing trick, and then coming back home, and the wonder that when you did that in front of people, the sort of that performance and the brilliance that you would sort of, the response that you would get from people. So I ended up like going, oh yeah, I'm going to be a magician, and I would go. My mum ran an old people's home, and so I'd go in there and I'd do tricks for like magic shows for like the elderly. Which was kind of interesting, but it was a sort of mixed bag, because half of them were sort of asleep and most of them couldn't see or hear you. But it was moderate success. And then I'd go and do really disastrous shows for like 12-year-old birthday parties. When I was probably like 12 or 13, and I was doing magic shows at kids' parties, and it was a disaster because I just didn't have the authority, and they'd run up and they'd like try and look in your sleeve and it would fall apart. But I just loved, I don't know, the process and the art that went into magic. And I guess in so many ways, I've carried that with me through all of the work I've done. And certainly in Sharper, there's a lot of the engineering that goes into magic that we've sort of, brought into this.
Incredible.
Ben, we are unfortunately out of time. They're about to jerk us out of this room, but if you cannot tell, we are fans of you and your work, and we just truly appreciate you taking the time to chat. Hopefully you enjoyed yourself.
So maybe like one more question, maybe, but they got to wrap up. So.
Okay, you can carry on if you want.
Can we get one more?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, Jake, go ahead.
You have time?
All right. Well, oh my God, I wasn't prepared. Well, I am, if you don't mind, just because I geeked out with you a little bit before, and I know our audience is a massive fan of your work on Andor, and so I would be remiss if I didn't get your opinion on something, because I really want to follow up on something that you just told me about an hour ago, which was that you're just not a massive Star Wars fan, and I feel, which I find to be fascinating, because oftentimes
I'm gonna get taken out. I mean,
but I think that's brilliant though, because I mean the fact that you turned in the quality of work that you did. I mean that your Andor your episodes are some of the best Star Wars I've ever seen in my life.
Wow.
And I'm just curious.
I love you.
If you think that like. Is it better sometimes maybe to have an emotional disconnection from a material? We often hear about J.J. Abrams growing up with Star Wars, and I loved what he did. But the fact that you gave us what you did, not being a rabid, insane Star Wars fan, I find to be fascinating. And do you think there's value in having that disconnect? I
do personally, because that's my way into this. And I guess, look, the example I could give would be... there was when there's a world where you get on a set of Star Wars and you're like, whoa, look at those creatures, or whoa, look at that building, or whoa, look at that spaceship. I was like, yeah, like, no, that's not entirely true. Some of the creatures were like pretty cool, but you're like, I'm not going to, there's not like a sort of sub story where I'm going to go off and fetishize those creatures, that they are sort of just the part of the beautiful landscape that exists. And, if we were somewhere else, if we were, in a Western, they're just the people that coexist, on the sidelines. And so I guess there was, for my take, it was like, okay, that's part of the world. They exist. If you see them, you see them. If you don't, you don't. But I'm going to focus, my guiding principle is I'm going to focus on the characters and follow them as like an arrow as much as I can. I one of the great things about doing Andor, and it was meeting Tony, I'm forever indebted, with working with him. I learned so much from him, and I think he's just a brilliant mind, and he is the reason why, the great success of Andor and obviously the amazing cast. But I sort of wanted to go from, I'd been working on The Crown for 5-6 years, and it was a, historical period drama, which allowed me to flex so many different muscles. But I wanted to go and do something that was terrifying and was different, and what better than to go and make an adventure in space.
Right.
And I remember the very last episode, he wrote, which was the rhythm of that piece was very, very particular. It was a lot of it was, him and Nicholas Britell had written this piece of music, and so much of it was, you had to be really sure about where characters were, how long you were with the characters, where certain moments were happening in the piece of music. So that was a very new thing to me, I guess. So I had to be a really good student and be well prepared on that episode. So I had we, with my cinematographer Damien, who's amazing, and my assistant George, and my first Finn, we spent 2 weeks on a half-built backlot in Ferrix. No, it wasn't Pinewood. It's actually down the road. It was sort of it was a bit further down the road from Pinewood. But we were like, they were building it around us, and we were like out there with an iPhone shooting every single scene and trying to work out the sight lines and the perspective. So by the time, and then I went back to the to my editor, Jan, who's cut sharper, and we pieced it together. So by the time I actually came to shoot Andor, I'd pretty much shot most of that film on my phone. So I knew, so actually it was one of the best shoots, because I could have this warm comfort blanket of knowing that it worked. And obviously there's on the day you could sort of play around with it, but it was like the most disciplined I've ever been in terms of directing, and also kind of rewarding, but in a very different way.
And they're gonna hate us for keep going, but was it you that wanted the first F-bomb? Because I'd read that someone wanted the first F-bomb in that speech at the funeral. Was it you that wanted it? And how close were you guys to getting it?
You mean fuck the Empire?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, that was Tony. That is Tony. And he, right from the very beginning, he's like, we're going to do this. We're going to get away with this. I mean, Disney have said no, but there's no way. I am not letting them get away with this. And I was like, all right, okay, we're going to do it. And then, so somewhere out there is a recording.
Oh, so you guys shot it?
Hell yeah. I was like, Fiona Shaw. Yeah, I mean, Fiona Shaw. That was like the first thing that came out of her mouth, when we were shooting that. And then they were like, then the producer was like, okay, you need to get a safety. And I'm like, oh, come on. They were like, you need a safety. So yeah,
Tony
in my head.
Wrote a letter to George Lucas.
In my head, when I see that, I hear fuck the Empire, not fight the Empire.
Wait, why? I don't understand. Like, you're allowed to have one F-bomb in a quote unquote PG-13 type of world. And Disney now has R-rated material on their platform. I mean, they should have just allowed that one.
No comment.
That makes no sense. Yeah.
Ben, honestly, thank you so much for your time, and we can honestly talk to you all day, and we hope you enjoyed yourself on the show.
Yeah, I did. It was
these
fun.
these insights were incredible, and we're going to continue to push the movie and get everybody to go check it out. So continued success, man. We really appreciate you.
Yeah.
Please
Thank you so
come
much.
All right, we want to thank Benjamin Caron for coming on the show, and our friends at Apple TV Plus, in addition to Ben's reps for giving him some time on here. Look out for Sharper. Like I mentioned, it's in limited release right now. It's going to be coming to Apple TV Plus. It's definitely worth checking out, and we'll give a longer review on it when we get there. Okay, there was a news story that I wanted to get to discuss, and it involves the AMC Theatres pricing changes that they are suggesting. I'm not sure when or if these are ever going to go into effect. And Gabe wanted to throw out a little something before we started talking about it.
I don't think there's no legal disclosure we need to make, but I want to give the disclosure of sometimes AMC Theatres sponsors the show. If you've been listening, you've probably heard some things. So take everything that we say here, I guess, with a grain of salt. That you might need. They're not sponsoring this episode. And hopefully, I think we have countless examples of wonderful interviews with filmmakers who we then tell you immediately afterwards why we didn't like their movie or what didn't work for us. Mm-hmm. You know, hopefully we've gained a little bit of credibility in your eyes, but just wanted to give that out there of obviously that's a thing, but we feel the way that we feel about this.
And absolutely, like AMC is also a great partner, content partner with Cinema Blend.
Sure.
And I mean, I would still choose to go to AMC Theatres in my market regardless, but I wanted to bring this up because I find this to be pretty interesting, not just for what AMC is doing, but if the rest of the industry is going to go in this direction, right, and if it's going to be something that we need to be paying attention to because it might affect other facets of the entertainment industry as well, too. So just if you have no idea what we're even talking about, I want to give you guys an idea that Variety earlier this week reported that there was going to be a new pricing structure. And here they say the initiative kicks off on Friday at select AMC locations in New York, Chicago, and Kansas City, and will be expanded to all domestic AMC locations by the end of the year. So you might have a little time before it comes here, but it's essentially going to be a sightline type of approach to ticketing in a multiplex. So you'll have a standard and a value and a preferred. To give you an idea how that goes, the standard is going to be the most common traditional cost, what you would normally pay for the price of a movie ticket when you go. The value is going to be allegedly the front row, and it'll come at a cheaper cost for your ticket. But of course, you know, it's not a place where you ultimately want to sit.
I don't know how many people, I don't know if I've ever met anybody that likes the front row ticket. I'm sure they exist.
And
I've only ever sat there if I had to.
Yeah.
I'll tell you what's unusual about, well, let me just finish with the preferred ticket. Is going to be the more expensive version of your movie ticket, and it's going to be essentially the middle of the auditorium. So I guess this applies to, as we get into discussing it now, I want to just figure out some questions I have about the theory. Like this essentially applies to when you're reserving tickets online, right? And you're picking your seat.
Or even at the theater, probably too, when you get to the kiosk and you're choosing
whenever
your
you
seat.
buy your ticket,
choose it from the thing.
Point of sale is,
because I'll say that, like, more often than not, when I go into a movie theater, it's not crowded. I can't remember the last, I guess Spider-Man No Way Home, opening weekend, which was like an event. And I guess that's kind of what they're going for. But if you went to an AMC on a Tuesday evening, let's just say, and you went into the auditorium, you would kind of have your pick of the theater, wouldn't you?
I want to point out, sorry, in your example, they do know, because there are a couple, other details. One is the Tuesday $5 tickets is not going to change. It's funny that you gave a random Tuesday.
Oh, really?
Example.
That's funny. Gotcha.
So technically, no, that won't change. So the other details that they mentioned, to get fully into the weeds, it's only screenings after 4 p.m. It's not on Tuesdays. They had a couple other caveats. And then if you're like an AMC Stubs member, you won't be affected by it.
From what I understand.
So there's like a bunch of other incentives and small things. But I think the larger issue that a lot of people have, I think some of us probably have, and especially on face value, is it kind of feels like you're economically gatekeeping the quote unquote preferred experience for people. And I think that's what a lot of people took, myself included, offense to, I guess is the word. Like it just feels icky is the simple way to put it.
Yeah. I think Elijah Wood kind of put it well. I'm going to read his tweet real quick. So he said, quote, "The movie theater is and always has been a sacred democratic space for all. And this new initiative by AMC Theatres would essentially penalize people for lower income and reward higher income," which is interesting. And I said this on the air today on my show. And this is not like uncommon for sports, concerts, Broadway. Yeah. And obviously you sit closer to the field of the 50-yard line at a football game. You're spending a lot more money than you would in the 400 levels, or, like sure. Nas, if I'm going to see Nas is coming to MSG in a couple weeks, and like he has a ton of front row tickets that are $1,000 and you can sit the other place for 200. And that's just a common thing. But to have it happen in a movie theater is strange, but also at a time where we are trying our hardest to get people back in the theaters as much as possible. And
that's obviously my point. Right, why make it harder in any way?
And that's the thing. This is just another way to give an excuse to like people like my mom and dad who are hesitant to go back to the theater still because we are still in a pandemic. And at the same time, the initiative idea of like wanting people to spend more money to sit in those seats, I can just see my mom and dad going, I'll just wait for it to hit VOD. And that's the thing at the end of the day. I mean, like, we've noticed this a lot. We talk about this a lot on the show. The pandemic has proven to us, at least now, what types of films people are leaving their houses for. Right. And it's those blockbusters, the Avatars, the Top Gun Mavericks, and horror movies. Horror movies are doing extremely well in theaters. And so the middle of the road films, and I mean by that is like the dramas, the Fabelmans, the Banshees of Inisherin, great films, but films that really do skew older, right? Are gonna be more affected by this. It really it's a weird time to do it. Like right now, it feels like, with everything happening right now, with people really trying to get people back in the theaters, it seems like it's almost like, let's just push everyone back again. Why not?
Do you think they saw Avatar? Do you think they saw Avatar packing theaters and they got reminded of the way that it used to be? Because you're 100% right. Like with me, it's a supply and demand issue.
Right.
Mm-hmm. And if there was a huge demand for tickets,
sure, right.
And then all of a sudden you'd be like, well, now we can charge a little bit extra because everyone's trying to grab these tickets. But I think you're 100% right. Like in between the blockbuster events.
Yeah.
I think theaters are hurting for people.
This is not a Taylor Swift concert.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
This is not like
Smile,
That's
this
right.
is like, so.
And I think,
I'm confused by it. It's more than anything. I'm
confusing. By it. I mean, business wise, I get it.
Sure.
I guess. But
because they're saying they're going to make more money. I'm curious. I think for us, for this much smaller piece of the pie that are people like us who are probably feel really romantic about the theatrical experience. We're probably thinking of a version of ourselves right now who's 12 or 13, saving up, maybe they have a job or whatever, and they're trying to see as many movies as they can. We're thinking about the times that we fell in love with movies and imagining that being harder sucks. And I that's how I feel. I do feel that way. I am curious that with us being the smaller piece of the pie, with them rolling this out, I'm really curious to see how a general audience reacts to this because one, I don't think we have any details yet about like how broadly those seats, like is it, let's say it's a 200 seat theater. Is it 10 seats that are going to cost more, or is it 50 seats that are going to cost more?
And what is the price difference? Like for example, like how many dollars difference is the middle and the front?
Those are the details we don't have yet. And I think they're like keeping that vague because they're probably rolling that out and they're probably trying to figure out like what's the threshold. I wouldn't be surprised if the larger public doesn't like it and they don't, like you guys are alluding to the idea of ticket prices going up when we're trying to build interest. I could see this not working and completely, not rolling out by the end of the year.
Look at Ant-Man coming out next week. Okay. Ant-Man is coming out in IMAX. I want to say 3D. I'm almost certain Dolby. It'll be in all and then whatever other, I guess we're talking about AMC specifically, but whatever premium formats are given, you're already upcharging. First of all, that movie's not shot in 3D, and then they're going to charge you whatever extra dollars to see it in 3D, which I wouldn't recommend because it wasn't shot in 3D. But in terms of that, you're already upping the charge. There's already a premium added to the IMAX. An IMAX ticket for Quantum Mania on a Saturday night at 7 o'clock. I don't want to have this wrong, but it's definitely over $20, at least where I live. So it's crazy.
So that's a good point. And to close that thought that I was having, if it's only 10 seats, if it is a small amount, if they really are targeting people like us who are going to be like, man, I really want to be center of house right there, even with the screen or whatever, and I'm going to pay the extra $5. These are all numbers that I'm making up.
Sure.
And more like the majority of the seats are still going to be a normal price, and the person that sees 3 movies a year, and they're usually superhero movies or big blockbuster movies, aren't going to even notice because maybe they're not even going to get on early enough to get the seats that are preferred. Right. I'm very curious to see if I know why we're upset by it, but I am curious if they're going to feel any sort of incentive along those lines from the larger public, or if it's, depending on how it rolls out, if they're just going to kind of not care because it's not going to affect them. You
mentioned an interesting point. The general audience goes to on average 2 movies a year. Is that right? 2 to 3?
I think it's
Is that
3,
right?
but it might be. Yeah, I think 3 was the average I always heard. But
so Kev, let's say if you were not you. Right.
Sure.
And you were someone who saw 3 movies a year. And this year in particular, you knew that Oppenheimer was one of them. Right.
Yeah.
Huge Nolan fan. You know that he makes movies for the theater. Yeah. And you found out you had to pay a little bit extra for the middle seat for the most immersive experience possible. You would do it. Right.
I would do it. Yeah, because I guess. Well, and that's really kind of then another interesting point you bring up. If you do go to the movies 3 times a year, is this something that would bother you? Probably not. I mean, in the sense of like it might not, because if you're someone who goes once every 2 weeks, once a month, or whatever it is, you might start feeling that additional thing.
Absolutely.
But like the story you just told sounds like you're almost like you're going to a concert event, and it's like, going to see Oppenheimer's like you're leaving the house. It's a special night. It's once every 4 months.
Yep.
I could see the person going, yeah, I would pay an extra $2 to get the best seat because I don't go often. Right. It's the people that go a lot, which there are people who go a lot.
And those movies, like I'm thinking of, recently, like when I went to go see Dune in a public screening, and that thing was packed. Mm-hmm. Most people didn't have the best seat. Like most people were happy to sit wherever for that event film. And so that's that's kind of the larger point, is we have to wait and see how the actual market, quote unquote, to make it sound cold, is going to respond to it, because I know why I think it sounds gross. I know why I don't like the idea. I don't love the idea of like, hey, opening night, or hey, the first 2 weeks in theaters, it's going to be more expensive if you want to be a part of the cultural event. Like all these things that they're trying to find ways to make more money. I understand the business of it. I understand that incentive. I understand, theaters being closed for 2 years and needing to.
But theaters don't make their money on tickets. They make their money on concessions. That's the weird part. Like they make a very small amount on the tickets.
It's fair, but maybe this preferred, maybe 100% of the preferred pricing goes to them. I don't know this. I do. But if
that's actually a good point.
If Disney's saying, well, we're going to take 6 of or we're going to take, 12 of the $16, and they say, well, we're going to start $20, and we'll get, I don't know. I don't know how that works.
Gabe, that might be it, because famously, that's why your concessions cost so much. Movie theaters, again, this is just I'm just being like, random here, but let's say a large popcorn costs AMC $1 to make, and they're selling it to you for $9 or $10 or whatever it is. That's their money. Like the percentage of them. But that's why even with someone like an M. Night Shyamalan, when he pays for his own films, even like that percentage, he gets so much of that money and the studio gets a certain percentage. But like, I if somebody listening can let us know, I'd love to know like what percentage movie theaters actually get from ticket sales, because I'm curious. Gabe brings up a very interesting point. Maybe the premium is for them.
Firm numbers, but it's I believe there's like a schedule. Like it's like within the first X weeks of the release, most of it goes to the studio, and then as it gets further out from release, the theater keeps more and more. That's why there's always like dollar shows, or like those $5 shows. You can see something 6 months after it came out. Those theaters that live on that, because they're like, pretty much keeping.
They're past the profit.
And they can charge $5 because they're making $4 on it instead of.
Also, am I a psychopath? I like sitting on the aisle.
Okay, so you're like this too.
I was
gonna note our editor in chief, Mac, is like that as well. So he's eating
I
this
need
up.
leg room.
Like, hey, good for me.
I need leg room, and so I like to be able to sort of pivot and put my legs out straight into the aisle, the steps.
I always sit in the Christopher Nolan seat because like he has a seat in at Universal City Walk that he sits in because he tests his dailies
Right.
There, and I think it's like K16 or J16, but it's like right in the dead center. I've sat in it. It's phenomenal.
Center, I try to, like with the stadium seating places, I try to sit center of the screen itself, like in height. Unless it's like too far, but
you want to charge me extra? Give me that seat that has the bars right in front of it.
Those are the best.
Those are the best. I would pay extra for those every single time to be able to put my feet up on them or stretch my legs out.
I saw somebody on Twitter that said that why don't you just buy a ticket in the front row and then just move when the movie starts?
Well, that's my point. Yes, exactly.
Oh my God, they're gonna have ushers like at sports, like at games, like sorry, this is not your section.
But that's right. How are they going to enforce it? They're not going to have some teenager come in and say, "Let me check your ticket stub."
Well, no,
I don't buy a front row seat.
Yeah, I don't know.
It's like buying a child ticket.
There's too many questions. There's too many questions that we have about like how much is it going to be? How many seats is it really going to be?
Oh my God.
I assume that's why it's limited and they're like rolling it out is because they don't really know and they need more information. I will say to stay on the like, romantic idea of the theaters. I love being able to pick my seat because I love sitting in that seat. But even that ruins some of the romance of growing up. And I love it because I skip trailers. But the romance of growing up and getting there really early, like earlier than anyone else because I want to get the seat.
Yeah,
you skip trailers?
And I have to get there. Yeah. Yeah. Why would I sit there and watch trailers?
That's interesting.
What?
That's interesting.
That's my favorite thing to do is watch trailers.
I mean, we've been doing this podcast for how long? I don't like watching trailers.
My buddy sits outside in the hallway till
There's too many spoilers in trailers.
Yeah. Wait a second. You're on a movie site. You watch trailers all the time.
I have to. Yeah, I know. This is my burden. This is the cross.
But when you were a kid, dude, when you were a kid, okay, so we discussed this before, but back in the day before the internet existed, that was the way you found out movies were coming out.
Different story.
Yeah.
Like that you didn't like them back then.
I would say it probably was in the last 10 or 15 years that I really started like paying attention to how much.
I can imagine young Gabe being annoyed at the trailers.
I was, man. I was
being shown.
Yeah, well, because it was especially if you watch a lot of movies and you're like paying attention to movies and not just not just like enjoying movies as content, but if you're like trying to study them or learn them or whatever, you watch them enough, you start to learn patterns. You see something in a trailer and you go, oh, well, that's a very third act thing, so that'll be in the third act. The thing that most annoys me, and maybe it's just my own brain, I'll see something in the trailer, and as much as I don't want to remember that I saw it, I'll be an hour and 10 minutes into a movie and go, you know what? We haven't seen that shot of him on the thing, so this is what's going to happen because I saw that my brain starts putting the puzzle piece together, and I don't want it to.
Not a bad point. I don't like trailers. In Gabe's defense, I've sat in many movies and said, "Oh wait, where's this scene? When's the shot?"
Yeah,
that's why Marvel's so interesting is they misdirect. Marvel will misdirect in trailers, which is actually remember like the whole famous Endgame with Tony and Cap shaking hands. It was like not what it was in the trailers. It was very different.
That I think it's still going on. That lawsuit for the Yesterday trailer, that's going to be interesting. Yeah, that becomes a thing.
Oh yeah, that's right.
Who was the actress who was shown? Who was the actress?
Anna de Armas, I believe.
Oh right, yeah. But people thought she was in it.
Yeah, and that's a little different than I guess. It's not quite like completely misdirecting the plot. It's more like we were here to see this person. I don't know. That's complicated. But the legal precedent that it sets, that I was hearing someone break it down, is like the way that they'll have to categorize trailers is they won't be expressive. Like right now, they're like considered expressive art. And so if they can get sued for the trailer being misleading, then like trailers will have to be super literal and like how kind of that'll make trailers worse if they have to. They have to exactly. I don't know. It was kind of an interesting, complicated topic, but
they charge you extra to go in for the trailers now. I added price to go in early and watch them.
Yeah.
Do y'all think this?
I don't like them because when I go to a public screening and the trailers play, it's literally a half an hour. It's a half an hour of trailers. And every time another one comes up, I'm like, you should start the movie. And then they have some sort of pre-roll, like advertising the theater and the concession stands and all that jazz. Like just start the movie at that point. Then I get a little itchy.
You guys are killing me.
This all started with me saying I do. The theaters, it's a romantic experience. Probably most people listening here feels that way.
I think so.
I mean, I do want to ask, I don't know if you guys have any final thoughts, but before we move on, I am really curious, like to a person, how people feel about this, if they feel like it'll affect them or not. Sean, and you mentioned an example of you're like, I don't even really want those quote unquote preferred seats.
Yeah.
So it doesn't.
I mean,
I want to hear from people at home.
This sounds awful, but like I don't pay to go to the movies that often. I go
sure
to
for you personally,
screenings,
it's not going to affect you, right?
So I feel like it won't.
But again, that's what I'm saying.
When we do
home,
as a group, when we do as a group, when we do go,
when Pop takes the family out for a Shake Shack, a Shake Shack night and movies.
It's getting more expensive nowadays.
Yeah, you imagine doing a Shake Shack and a preferred seating night?
See,
oh man,
I value the movies so much that I feel like I would pay the extra because I don't mind paying, because I enjoy going so much. Like I enjoy the experience, and that's what I would want to spend my money on. And would I be annoyed that they're charging more? Of course,
I think on principle, kind of yeah, to your point, I think on principle, raise ticket prices if that's what the market needs.
Sure.
If that's what your business needs. But there is something inherently, I think, icky, like I said, to be simple, about the idea of some people get to enjoy it this way. Those who unfortunately cannot attain that now don't get to enjoy it that way. The idea of especially movies as an art form being sort of blocked off to people because of where they are financially is inherently gross. If everything, the same effect happens if everything becomes this new preferred price. Okay, now it's more expensive to go to the theaters. Now less people in general can go. So it's one of those, like, it's more of an argument on principle than practice, maybe. But it's true. It just feels wrong to not allow people who are passionate about it, but maybe can't afford.
You're asking people to pirate stuff.
Maybe,
at this stage of the game. Kev, what's your final consensus on it?
I mean, I don't like it, obviously.
Yeah.
I mean, at the end of the day, I mean, we're in a day and age where Regal Cinemas is filing for bankruptcy, and like theaters aren't, theaters need help. Theaters need consistent attendance. And, I think this is going to be a good year for attendance. Obviously, there's a lot of anticipated films with Creed and Quantumania, and then Oppenheimer and Dune Part 2. I mean, there's a lot going on. So I think, I think it's a poor timing choice. Let's say pandemic didn't happen, and we were in a world where theater experience like didn't dip the way it did and things like that.
They would probably still eventually do this. I mean,
it might have come about.
It's
but
a business regardless.
The timing is bad. But also, Gabe brings up a really good point. Just raise the ticket prices $1 or $2. If you, I'm not advocating for people to be charged more. I just want to clarify that. Sure. But I'm just saying, instead of making this weird situation where people are divided by certain seat preference and pricing, if you just raise the prices across the board by $1 or $2, then you hit it, and then you're not putting other people in different. Like about my anchor today on the air, he even said like, well, I sit in the back right corner of the theater when I go. I'm like, I won't be affected.
That's my point, is that the preferred seating is based on people like Kevin and myself who are like, I want to sit where the filmmaker sits when they mix this movie.
Right.
Most people don't give a shit. Most people just grab the first seat that has a space between them and the stranger that, they don't want to be next. Like,
I wanted to bring up too, like there's a theater by me that I like going to that has 4 rows of the, cushy plush chairs with the recliners. And the way that the auditorium is situated, the first row is far enough away from the screen that it's actually the one that I like to sit in, where I feel like I'm close and in the movie, but not like the upfront. So if you tell me like that's cheaper to sit in that front row, I want to sit in that front row anyway. It's weird. Like it's going to be such a strange situation, like even theater by theater, if the auditorium that you like to go into.
Every theater's different. And also, again, going back to these prices, I mean, it is, and that's kind of what I hope our show can do for audiences. And I think maybe we should dive into this more, because CinemaBlend used to actually did this before I even started doing a show with you guys. They would like to 3D or to not 3D.
Still do.
Right.
Still do.
And I know Mike Reyes.
Videos for that.
Yeah. It's a great concept because at the end of the day, like we the general audiences, when they walk up to a kiosk or they buy a ticket, they don't know what RDX, whatever, all those different like 3DX and like 4DX and whatever it's going to be.
What's the difference between a 4K IMAX and a 2K IMAX and the dual projector laser?
Yeah. I mean, and all those words sound like cool, so you upcharge the ticket, and I think they're already taking so much from audiences, but like at the end of the day, listen, I went and saw a movie last night in IMAX, and I sat in that theater and I was like, gosh, this is just amazing. Just like the sound was phenomenal. The theatrical experience was incredible. The screen looked amazing. That would be worth an upcharge ticket just for the IMAX alone. And I was sitting there going, this is why I love going to the movies. Like I'm really immersed in this experience. Like the IMAX theater I went to was in Georgetown. So it's the end of the day, like I get the pricing aspects of it, but I don't agree with the individual preferences. It's a very strange timing.
I did appreciate that they're keeping the $5 Tuesdays.
Yeah, and if you're a Stubs member, I guess
the example I always think about is being a kid who didn't have a lot of money and wanting to go to the theater, and it's like, well, a part of the love that you like, a part of falling in love with it was doing the hard stuff, and so like I don't know, maybe I'm just being overly romantic about it, but
I mean, there's nothing wrong with being romantic about it. I mean, at the end of the day, like the theatrical experience is something that is a romantic thing. And it's like, and like Gabe and I talk about like how much we love sitting in certain sections and seeing certain films in certain ways. But yeah, I'm curious. I don't think this is going to stick. I think they're going to get so much backlash. I mean, you have actors coming out that are like Elijah Wood that are tweeting to AMC, and these are people like that, have big followings, that have big, and you might start seeing people go, well, I'm not going to go to AMC, I'm going to go to XYZ or this theater or that theater.
Yeah. Even if the general audience ultimately doesn't care, if the noise around it is loud enough, it'll affect their purchasing decisions.
Yeah, for branding, it's kind of like a bad thing for branding because then they're like up where I live, there's a Tyson's AMC and a Tyson's Icon. What's to stop the person from going over to the Icon? They don't have to pay that preferred seating. So, and it's right across the street. So it's like, if you could save $3 or $4 and sit wherever you want and pay the same price as everybody else in the theater, why wouldn't you?
Yeah. Now I feel kind of icky throwing it to an ad break.
Yeah,
the best part,
a preferred ad break. We're charge you more.
The best part is this isn't like an ad that we've sold. This is like just pre-roll. You click on a YouTube video and something pops up. So who knows? This might be a Regal. Who knows?
Gabe, when are we launching? When are we launching extra premium ReelBlend?
Well, you know what? If you have premium, you have an ad-free version of the show.
That's true. That's true.
We're already in the preferred game.
Yes, we are. Consider us your middle seat in the auditorium. All right, we'll see you on the other side. And we are back. All right, so this week in movies, Titanic is coming back to theaters for a 25th anniversary celebration. Gabe and I were just talking about the fact that we may actually go out of our way to go see that. Gabe hasn't seen it on the big screen yet, and I haven't seen it in 3D. And just the opportunity to see something like this on the big screen again is pretty special.
Oh, are they releasing it in 3D too now?
I think so. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Another movie that I think more people would like to see in 3D is Magic Mike's Last Dance. Michelle
4DX
stopped talking every time the commercial comes on, so I think she's really excited to see how this franchise concludes. And then Consecration is a film that's opening in theaters, but I'm not familiar with what it is.
How weird is it that there's a new Soderbergh movie out this weekend and it's like it doesn't even feel like a Soderbergh movie in a strange way, even though
not
it
even
is.
that, like a Soderbergh movie that's part of a franchise that's been popular.
Yeah,
but like I don't know anyone who's seen it, and it's just kind of flying under the radar. So
yeah, it's a little weird. But that feels like a maybe I don't know. Maybe they're just smart about where they're spending their money. That feels like a franchise that has an audience.
Yeah,
and they've made a movie for that audience. Maybe
they're coming anyway.
Yeah, like they're like, well, if you want to see a new Magic Mike movie, you're gonna know that it's in theaters. Perhaps I don't know.
First one was great.
People that love that franchise, I know, are obsessed with it. So
yeah,
I like the second one too. It's kind of fun. There's a movie coming to Prime Video, and it's called Somebody I Used to Know. Is this the Dave Franco, Alison Brie? movie?
Yeah. Yeah,
Okay.
and it's a really interesting film about identity and kind of how we shape our lives and kind of who we are growing up, and then how our perceptions change. But one of the things I really took away from it was this concept of how much weight we put on one certain aspect of our identity. So for example, if you just work all the time and that's the thing that you're wrapped up in the most in your identity, then if the littlest shift happens or it completely devastates you. And I think that's why it's important to have things outside of work and outside of those things like family and friends and hobbies and things like that. But the concept behind the film is, so it's written and directed by Dave Franco. Alison Brie also co-wrote it with Dave Franco. And in the film, her character essentially left to go to Los Angeles, it was dealing with a very popular show that then after its third season was canceled, kind of similar to what happened with Alison Brie and Glow, which is interesting consistent thing there. But so she returns home and essentially runs into her ex, Jay Ellis's character from Top Gun Maverick. And he and her have like a wonderful time together. They hang out for a bit, and then she realizes, oh, he's getting married. And so what ends up happening is her character kind of becomes almost friendly with the person that Jay is going to marry, played by Kiersey Clemons. And it reminds her of somebody she used to know, which was herself at that point, before she got, her perceptions and life perspective shifted from the move. And yeah, it's a really interesting, I think it's a great concept because it spoke a lot to me just in terms of, what we do, how much weight we put on certain things and what it means, and how we forget the love and the things that we go through in our early days, and kind of how life can really get in the way of that, and kind of keeping that balance. And that's what really struck me with it. It's an R-rated romantic comedy. It's on Amazon Prime Video. It's, Valentine's Day kind of hits that mark perfectly. Alison Brie, I was talking to her, which I thought was really interesting, which I asked her about the roles in her career that reminded her the most of who she was growing up. And obviously this film is interesting because it is co-written by her. So there's like a scene where her and Kiersey Clemons go streaking, and she's like, I used to do that all the time in college. And I was like, but she talked about how Glow actually helped her get in touch with doing non-sexual nudity on screen and being comfortable with it. And the idea of being comfortable with your body and wanting to show it in that way, but in a non-sexual way. The movie's actually, it raises a lot of interesting points. I mean, I don't think it's perfect. It's definitely, it's good. I enjoyed it. It's very interesting. I actually walked away more thinking about the thematics than I did maybe the characters, because but that's kind of the best thing about movies, right? Is it makes you reevaluate and think about your life in certain ways, in different ways. But yeah, I think Franco's a really interesting filmmaker. I thought The Rental was great. We had him on. Definitely go back and listen to that interview if you haven't heard it. He was great. And, but yeah, it's a well-made film that does bring up a lot of interesting aspects. I thought the cast was great. And, Alison Brie and Dave Franco are married in real life. So it's really kind of a cool thing they got together and to do this. So it's on Prime Video this weekend. And yeah, I recommend it. It's a good at home, maybe like a date night type movie. I don't think you'll walk away going, that was one of the most incredible things I've ever seen before, but it works.
Yeah. Good for the Valentine's Day weekend, I assume.
I'm definitely going to give that a shot. All right. So Benjamin Caron was our guest earlier in the episode, and he has a movie coming out called Sharper. And I want to tell you guys that it is, you have to see it. Like, just go out of your way to see it. But it's going to be a type of movie that I can't really get into specifics because it has a lot of twists and turns.
Love this.
And anything you know about it right off the bat. Like, I literally went into it, interesting with our conversation earlier about trailers. I hadn't seen a trailer and I had no clue I don't know what the movie is about. And so even from the opening scene, which takes place in a bookstore where this girl who is getting her PhD at Columbia in New York City is looking for a book. And the guy behind the counter, who's played by Justice Smith, he asks her out and she essentially says no, but then she comes back later and she's like, okay, no, I actually do think I want to give it a shot. I'm sorry, I was just being defensive, sort of thing. And it follows their relationship for a little bit of time, but there are things that are coming in this movie that you literally cannot see. You just don't see them coming at all. And Benjamin Caron, the director, broke it up. Well, the screenplay, I guess, broken up this way too, but they're broken up into chapters so that each time you get to a certain point of the story, it shifts its perspective to another character, and then you start at the action earlier, and you sort of catch back up to where you were, and then you keep going further. And then when you go further, you meet another character, and then you get a chapter break, and then you follow that character as they come back up to it. And so throughout the course of the movie, you meet Sebastian Stan, and you figure out how he factors into the story. And then you meet Julianne Moore, and you learn how she factors into the story. And finally, you get to John Lithgow. And once all the pieces are on the board, again, you just don't know where it's going. You don't know where it's going. And I was really, really impressed, not just with the story, which I thought was fantastic, and all the performances were great, but the way that Benjamin shoots the film, and we talked about this with him, he puts so much thought into the construction of his scenes and the way that he stages certain things that, and it's funny to hear him talk about happy accidents, because so many of these shots, they look like, and he talked about his interest in still photography and how he sets up certain things. Like, there are beautiful, beautiful shots in this movie that are just like visually so eye-catching, that he's somebody that I would follow for a while, regardless, because I just want to see what he's going to do visually. But it's a great, great story, and the performances are really terrific. I want to single out Brianna Middleton, who plays the girl in the opening scene who is going into the bookstore. She has to go through so much in this film and change gears so many different times, and she's mesmerizing in each of the different turns that her character has to go through. Go into it as clean as you possibly can. I've danced around a lot here, believe me. Don't watch a trailer, don't read up on anything, just go see Sharper. It's in limited edition, limited theaters right now, and on the 17th it's going to be going to Apple TV Plus. So if you have a subscription to that, make sure you see it. But the reason why I recommend the big screen is he shot it on 35 millimeter, as Kevin points out in the interview. It looks fantastic, and he's got a great, great, great visual eye, and has a Clint Mansell score. So you want to go see that in a theater with the speakers and everything. So it's great. Put Sharper on your radar, and it's truly, truly terrific. So that leads us into our blend game, which is hashtag movie couple blend in honor of the Valentine's Day holiday. We will throw it to Jake's recording at the end of the segment, but we're going to start with Gabe, who doesn't get to play the blend game that often. Gabe. Jake. I just automatically go to Jake.
What was that, Kev?
And no, I was saying, and Gabe, set up what this, because this is not what it sounds like. It's a little different.
Well, movie couple. It's just a movie couple. Whatever. I kept that vague on purpose of have fun with it. If you want to pick like a bromance or whatever, it doesn't have to be a romantic or sexual thing in the movie. It's more of shared love between two people.
Well, Michael Breen said Jay and Silent Bob, and as soon as he said that, I was like, "Oh,
a great example of what a stretch of a movie couple might be."
3PO and R2.
Yeah, I think the what I gave last week was 3PO and R2 is great.
Thank you. I should have kept
Jonah
that.
Hill and Michael Cera in Superbad, and that movie is very specifically playing with the bromance idea and with like their literal scenes where they're like talking to each other like a romantic couple, which is fun.
Right.
I didn't know I was playing this until today, so I went with the first thing that came to my mind, which I thought about it and I like it more and more. I've talked about this on the show, and it's a fairly recent one, but I don't think that since I've seen this movie, I don't think I've felt the same way about a romantic couple in a movie. Like, I don't think I've ever had such a strong reaction.
Oh, can I guess what yours is?
Yeah.
Is it Ethan Hawke and Julie Delpy in the Before trilogy?
No. So what I mean
pick.
by is, since I've seen this, I have not seen a movie released or gone back on one, because it's a fairly recent movie. It came out in 2019, and that is Portrait of a Lady on Fire. Which I think you guys know that I love.
Wow. Good choice.
Criterion.
If you don't know anything about the movie, maybe it's a little bit of a spoiler to say that it's romantic. I think you picked that up pretty quickly, but the story itself in the movie, I think, is incredible. I think the direction is incredible. I think that the way I always describe it is like, this is a meditation on desire, and what that means in a love story. And I think that it's directed perfectly to every single thing is to make you feel that. It's a very French-made film in that it really is focusing on the audience feeling what they are seeing. I think it's an incredibly powerful film, incredibly powerful performances. I think the love story is beautiful, and I think that again, not to get into spoilers in this because I want people to see it if you haven't, I think everything that it leads to is it's one of those just amazing emotional reactions to a film that I since then I have not had quite that intense of a reaction to a romantic couple in movies.
Very good choice. Very good choice. Kev, where'd you go?
It's so funny. I'm like in my mind, I'm like switching back and forth. Like Jay and Silent Bob is such a great one. But then
you kind of have an obvious one, don't you? One that's like your.
Do I? Oh, is it the one I mentioned earlier before we started the show?
I don't remember what you mentioned.
I
figured you're for if Kevin McCarthy, if I were to pick like a romantic one, would be True Romance, would be like your.
Yeah. Now that's a great one. Yeah. And that was the thing that, because like we were talking about this earlier, because it doesn't have to be a romantic relationship. But True Romance is, yeah, I mean, it's obvious, or When Harry Met Sally. But my favorite like on-screen like duo. Jules and Vincent's great too, but I honestly, I'm telling you, I am obsessed with Mike and Marcus from Bad Boys.
Yeah. That's a great choice. That's great.
I love those characters. I just think they're amazing together. I could watch a scene of, I mean, even scenes of just those guys driving in a car together, just having their banter is so funny. Like in Bad Boys 2, when they go into the morgue, what was it, a mortuary? What's the word I'm looking for? Where they, with the dead bodies and like that, and they're getting the drugs out of it.
I think it's a morgue. I'm now realizing
I
don't know that I know the difference between a morgue and a mortuary.
Yeah, neither do I. But like, just there's something so funny about those characters, and like Will Smith and Martin Lawrence play them so perfectly. And like, as we all saw with what Adil and Bilal did with the third Bad Boys, like there, even though Michael Bay wasn't there to direct it, that the chemistry lived on. And like, I don't know, there's just something about watching those guys in an action scene, in any type of scene, anything they're doing is just so funny. Bad Boys 2 and Bad Boys 1 obviously has material that is not appropriate in today's times or at any times, but their banter back and forth is really, really funny and also heartwarming. Like dude, in Bad Boys 3, the third one, quote unquote spoiler alert, so fast forward if you haven't seen it, when Will Smith's character gets shot and like I thought he was gonna die, like I was genuinely sad, like when Marcus goes to visit him at the hospital or whatever, and I was like, dude, I don't want these guys to be separated. Like I love their chemistry. And honestly, I'd watch 30 movies with those guys. When they announced the new Bad Boys 4, like, I don't care what they're doing, where they are. I just want those two characters on screen. Even if it's something as simple at the end of Bad Boys 2 with Martin Lawrence's pool that keeps breaking. Like just the way Mike jokes about it, or just sets him off. Like they're so fun to watch together. So that's, it's funny because Jay and Silent Bob is, I feel like would definitely be one of those that's up there. True Romance clearly for a romantic one for sure. Randall. Dante and Randall's a great one too. I mean, there's so many to choose from, but I don't know. I'm kind of in a Bad Boys vibe right now. I've been thinking about it a little bit since the announcement. I'm just super excited for that fourth one. So I love that. And they're just amazing together. They're the best.
That's another great example of like a non-romantic movie couple, because so much of the bits that they do are based on their partnership, and they like treating it like a partnership, and they're like, they're the disagreements and
it's like a marriage,
like exactly like the marriage thing that they do. They're playing into those tropes.
It's perfect, and and they handle it perfectly. Like Martin Lawrence, that's what's so funny about comedy. It's like there has to be somebody who's delivering dialogue and somebody who's reacting or getting angry or getting emotional about it. And like, there's just like, it's so hard to like explain why chemistry works, but there's just something magical about those two on screen at the same time playing those characters. And at the same time, as ridiculous as something as Bad Boys 2 gets in terms of the action and the comedy, there's such a grounded nature to their friendship that there's a core and a love that they both have for each other on a really deep level, even though like Gabe says, it's like a marriage aspect to the way they banter. So it's fun. I might watch Bad Boys 2 tonight, man. I love that movie. Man.
What are they going to call Bad Boys 4?
Oh, I know that. It's so funny. I remember when Bad Boys 3 got titled Bad Boys for Life. I want to say, and I don't know, this might be really redundant, but isn't Bad Boys for Life spelt FOR without
Yes.
the number 4.
I think we talked about this when that came out.
Yeah.
I
couldn't
no,
they just
I
do
think,
4?
I think the reason that they can't do that is because there's a song called "Bad Boys for Life" that uses the number 4.
Oh.
So I think that they, I don't know if they happened upon that.
Bad Boys Forever? I don't know what they're going to.
Yeah, but
they really kind of botched that a little bit.
But I love that they make fun of that in that video that they recorded with each other. They were like, "We used the perfect title."
I think this is a really good. This is a good role that Will Smith needs to do. It's a role that people love him in. I think it's a good one for him to, like, you know, regardless of what you think about the situation that happened at the Oscars. Like, I think this is a role that people will hopefully accept him back in. And I think I'm just excited to see him play Mike Lowry because, like, yeah, I mean, he's so good in it.
I saw a report today that they were already filming, but I don't know.
Really?
Well, it was a quote from Questlove who said that Will Smith wasn't at the Grammys for the hip hop 50th anniversary thing because he was filming. But the way he said it made me think he said like preliminary footage or preliminary. I feel like maybe they were just testing.
I'm with you in that my choice reflects kind of where I am right now, although I probably would have chose them anyway. But I want to give special shout out to Butch and Sundance, who are a classic. I even almost went Barb and Star because Barb and Star.
Barb and Star is a great.
That's a
truly
great
fantastic
one. Barb and Star is perfect. Like Barb and Star is basically like it's kind of like Mike and Marcus. Like it's like these two best friends who have this banter. It's great. Yeah. Okay.
But I am in a Shane Black mode as of late because I am working on The Last Boy Scout. And so I watched a ton of, yeah, sure, of course, you can guess.
No, go ahead. Set it up, though. I think I know where you're going, but...
I'm going with Riggs and Murtaugh from the first Lethal Weapon. Did you think I was doing Nice Guys? No, not Nice Guys. I'm doing Riggs and Murtaugh.
Yeah, you got to go Riggs and Murtaugh if you're going to pick a Shane Black. Yeah.
And I'm doing it, but specifically from the first movie, because after 2 and beyond, they became more of a comic relief duo. And leaned into the slapstick of it all. What's the matter?
Did you ever watch the TV show that they did based on those characters?
Yeah.
Was it any good?
Oh, the Fox television show with Damon Wayans?
They did like a cable show.
Not really. It was okay.
Damon Wayans?
Yeah, Damon Wayans was the Danny Glover part.
The series is so dependent on the actors' chemistry. Like, it's not just like...
I'll tell you what, it could have been a lot worse.
Sure.
It could have been a lot worse. It wasn't terrible, but it was also, It's
television
from being a
format is
primetime
also
show.
Different. Yeah.
Like they had to have a villain of the week type thing, and it was just that's not what you do. With
I bet the special effects looked exactly the same.
They
TV special effects.
They did try to really drill down into the different problems that these guys had in the show, and that's what I think is so significant. Because the reason why I love them, the reason why I think that they are such a great movie couple, is that in the first movie specifically, these two guys arrive in each other's lives at times when they desperately needed what the other guy gives.
Yes.
Riggs was suicidal. He had lost his wife. He had no more purpose in his life, and essentially was going into these situations where he got a guy down off the roof by essentially handcuffing himself to him and jumping. He went into a Christmas tree yard and broke up drug dealers by essentially trying to buy drugs from them, and then got into a shootout. Like, he just had a death wish and didn't care if he lived or died. And then Danny Glover's character had been on the force for so long that he was essentially 1 foot out the door and kind of forgetting why he became a police officer and lost that risk, the necessary risk that you have to sort of go into these dangerous situations. And by putting the two of them together in a classic sort of buddy cop formula situation, they not just learned off of each other, but I think became better because of what the other guy brought to them. And Kev talks about chemistry with Martin Lawrence and Will Smith. And I think Mel Gibson and Danny Glover had it in spades. And so much of it comes from the Shane Black screenplay in particular, but then those guys off screen became such great friends. And the way that they played off of each other was iconic. The last 30 minutes of Lethal Weapon is some of the best action cinema I've ever seen my entire life, starting with the shootout in the desert, going all the way through the torture scene, which is hysterical because if you watch The Last Boy Scout, Bruce Willis's 10 or 11-year-old daughter is watching the torture scene from Lethal Weapon when he comes into the room one day. And then
I love
through
Last Boy Scout.
The Gary Busey fight on the front lawn of Murtaugh's house is just terrific. So
I haven't seen that movie in so long.
Oh God, it's great. You have to put it on.
Who directed the first Lethal Weapon?
Richard Donner.
Oh, that's
Donner.
right. That's right. That's right.
He directed all
Donner.
4 of them, actually.
Yeah, I
Donner
remember
did
that.
4?
He did all 4 of them. Yep. Yes, he did.
Wow.
I remember that
So
now
show-
whenever,
yeah.
when he passed. I remember the tributes talking about those movies. And I was like, holy shit! I didn't realize that was him.
Donner's kind of underrated.
Oh my God! Yes.
Well, he comes from that
he's
classic
fantastic.
era of like workhorse director kind of thing. Like that's, I mean,
Yeah.
that guy had anything if not
We
experience.
don't talk about Richard Donner enough. Like, the other day we were on I was telling you guys that I thought
I have
Rob
a feeling
Reiner.
we're going to be talking about Donner when we get James Gunn's Superman.
Yeah.
I think so.
In
Yeah,
that-
because he did
in
the
that
first
sense.
Superman. He did the
Yeah.
Goonies. He did Lethal
Wait.
Weapon.
Donner did the Goonies.
Yes, he did.
Wait. I thought which one? Oh, I'm thinking of Sonnenfeld
Barry
did Men in,
Sonnenfeld. That's Men
yeah.
in Black. Yeah.
Men in
No,
Black,
Richard
okay.
Donner. He did Maverick with Mel Gibson.
Oh wow!
Dude, he's great. Richard Donner.
I used to
Wow.
watch that. I used to watch Maverick all the time when I was a kid, just because it was on like TBS or something.
Mel
Yeah.
Gibson?
Yeah,
Yep.
I watched the shit out of that movie.
And
Oh,
Jodie
man, the
Foster.
90s.
It's so charming.
Who's the,
it's
who's
so
the
charming.
other guy? Who's the
James
other guy?
Garner,
James
James
Garner.
Garner.
Yeah.
the original Maverick.
Do you guys ever
Television.
have moments where like your mind just goes somewhere random when you hear a movie? Like when you said
the time.
Maverick just now, the one this makes no sense. I went to Mad City with John Travolta.
Oh,
Do you remember
wow.
that movie? I don't know why. I just heard Maverick and then went to Mad City. And I have no clue why.
I would never
Maybe it was
have thought of
maybe
that.
they were both in the 90s, but I don't know why I went there, but that's where my head went.
Well, let's get to
But I
audience picks.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Or to Jake's pick.
Oh, Jake's
Oh, yeah.
pick. That's right. Let's throw it to Jake's pick for his selection for hashtag movie couple blend.
Hey guys, sorry I can't be there this week, but I know the show is absolutely incredible. I've been told that because Sean texted me that the show was amazing, even without me. I did want to play movie couple blend, and my answer is gonna be a little cliche. I was kind of bouncing forth between like fun answers. I thought about saying Tom Hanks and Wilson. I thought about saying Vincent Vega and Jules from Pulp Fiction, but I can't not pick one of like the first relationships in movies that I ever recognized in my life, which is Princess Leia and Han Solo. I mean, they are the results. I mean, they gave me what is my favorite line in all of movies, which is "I love you, I know." The progression of their disdain for each other that turned into a frustration and annoyance, which then turned into love, which we got to see not just over the course of 3 films, but then over the course of the sequel trilogy and what came of that. It's just a beautifully written, gorgeously realized, classic example of old school movie love that was perfectly represented by 2 simply flawless performances from both Harrison Ford and the late great Carrie Fisher. So I really did want to try to like have fun with this and pick like a fun, quirky one, but everyone I picked in my heart of hearts, I knew that it wasn't the right answer. And that for me personally, there was only one right answer, and that is Han Solo and Princess Leia. So hope you guys enjoyed the pick.
And now audience picks. All right, so Michael Breen, he went with Jay and Silent Bob. Danny Gerch said Ellie and Carl from Up. That's a great, really great choice.
Talk about heartbreaking.
Corey Holland went off screen. He said Ben Affleck and Matt Damon, but no specific project. I think that's terrific. That's really
What about
good.
Matt Damon and Jimmy Kimmel though? That might be another one.
That's a good one
That's
as
a
well,
good one too.
I can't remember. Matt Damon and Ben Affleck did Good Will Hunting too. Hunting season.
They
True.
did.
They also did
mean-
The Last Duel.
Yes, they did. That's true.
Well,
Nikki
yeah.
Hall said there is no greater rom-com couple than Meg Ryan and Tom Hanks. And Jay Elise says Neo and Trinity. Neo and Trinity is an interesting
Neo and
choice.
Trinity is
That's a
another
good one.
It's a good one.
That's a
So
good
thank you
one.
everybody for participating in this week's game. This was a lot of fun. I like going off the grid like that and being unique and different. So next week, as suggested in the opening joke of the show, we're going to be playing hashtag Jonathan Majors Blend. I have a feeling that our choices may change between now and the end of the year.
What a good act. What a great actor.
Yeah,
He's
a young
incredible.
career, but already has.
Great
I was looking
actor.
over his filmography. He already has a ton of performances that you could pick from.
Was
All
his
right.
breakout The Last Black Man in San Francisco? Was that his big breakout?
I think so. Yeah.
I want to, because I remember, let me see.
I think he
I
played
mean,
like bit parts in some other big stuff.
but that was,
So that was definitely like the big, like, oh, this guy can swing.
He's
like the one
phenomenal.
that I saw that really made him a big deal for me was The Five Bloods. Like, 'cause that was the performance that I was like, oh, this guy is
But he
incredible.
was
He's done amazing stuff before that, but
This was right before The Last Black Man in San Francisco. He was in White Boy Rick, which was kind of had some acclaim at the time. If I remember.
and he was in for
Right.
White Boy Rick.
That's
Right.
Yes.
He was in Hostels as well.
Oh my
with
gosh!
the Scott Cooper movie
Yeah.
with Christian Bale.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, I just remember seeing him in The Five Bloods because, correct me if I'm wrong, who
He's great.
steps on the landmine in The Five Bloods?
Spoilers for The Five Bloods. He does, but it's because isn't it a moment where the dad gets to save him?
Yes.
Right, and Delroy Lindo, right?
Yeah.
Is Delroy Lindo his father in
Yes.
the film?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yes.
that scene
Beautiful.
is insane.
Yeah.
Like, that was one of the most captivating, like, intense sequences I had ever seen in a movie. What a performance.
We sang the praises of that movie when it came out, but if you're listening now and you haven't seen The Five Bloods,
so good.
so good.
It's on Netflix.
Yeah.
Go check it out right now.
It's one of Spike's best movies. Like, it really, have we done Spike Lee blend?
Delroy Lindo. Just watch it for Delroy Lindo alone. That movie.
Didn't we have Delroy on the show for that?
Yes,
We did.
Yes,
we did.
Yeah.
And he was terrific.
He
I know we
was
say that all
awesome.
the time.
He was awesome.
Yeah.
We say that all the time, but he was really great.
He was awesome.
He
He was very like
great.
loose and just had fun and like
Yeah.
just enjoyed talking about. I think we got to dig into some of his legacy projects that he enjoyed digging into. It was
Because
fun.
he didn't end up getting nominated, did? Because he was such
No,
that
he
was
didn't.
an amazing performance.
I
It was
know.
a good
In The
question.
Bit
Five
of a
Bloods.
crime.
I talked to Jonathan Majors today, and I brought that up, and I think it meant a lot to him that people still mention that to him
Oh, that's
because
cool.
that is like, obviously he's about to enter an age of major blockbuster material here, and he kind of already did with the Loki finale and everything, but The Five Bloods really kind of, man, that performance.
The only Oscar nomination was for Terrence Blanchard's score.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
Which was terrific.
Great.
It was
that movie
great. It was
deserved-
a great score.
That movie deserved more nominations.
Yeah.
I watched the Creed 3 trailer again recently because I was doing a story about
Yeah.
it. He's so intimidating in that trailer.
Yeah, that's a really good blend game for next week.
All right, that's for next week. All right, so last week I begged people for reviews, and I was shameless about it, but I don't mind because it worked. We received reviews, so I'm going to continue to beg people for reviews, so we have something to read in this portion of the show, because we have a section where we put reviews, and we haven't had anything to read in a long time, but now we have something. And this one goes, "Hello, gentlemen. I've been meaning to write in a review for a long time now, so when Sean was begging people to send some in, I figured now would probably be a good time." He says, "Just kidding, Sean, but listen, I'm with you. I begged for people to send in reviews, and again, it worked."
I think the word I used
listening-
last week was you were berating people into it.
That's probably more accurate. Yeah.
Yeah.
I started listening to ReelBlend around the time of Once Upon a Time in Hollywood came out, a time when there was no intro music to the show, a running gag of Gabe not being a real person because he never spoke, and of course, the days of yelling Dunkirk at the end of every episode. In that time, many aspects of my life had changed. I was a single man living in the suburbs of Seattle, Washington when I became a blender. I am now a married man living in the suburbs of Tampa, Florida, and a brand new baby girl who is the cutest thing on this earth, though I may be biased in that opinion. Let me pause the review to say congratulations, sir. That's fantastic.
Congratulations.
Anyone who gets to be a father is outstanding, and we're really, really happy for you, and make sure your daughter listens to the show. A little new pop-up in the audience. But one thing that has stayed constant through these years is my love for this podcast. Kev, you're gonna love this. I grew up in on a military base in New Mexico where there was one theater with one screen and it cost $1 to see a movie. This was the 1990s, he says. And my mom was the only projectionist at this theater. I have vivid memories of being up in the projection booth while she spliced together the film. She was the one that told me about the cigarette burn in the top right corner. She pulled me out of the first Scream movie before Drew Barrymore was killed. I stayed up in the projection booth with her during Fallen with Denzel Washington because she got too scared. And I fell asleep in that booth watching The Postman. I grew up in the theater, and to this day, the smell of popcorn brings me right back to being a kid. Since the pandemic, I don't get out of the theater as much as I used to. My wife is at high risk for complications from COVID, and I have an infant. But listening to you guys makes me feel connected to that world still. ReelBlend has become one of my favorite podcasts, and I look forward every Friday to when the new episode drops. Your excitement for film and for filmmaking process is undeniable, and it exudes from every conversation you guys have with the interviewees and with each other. Sorry, not sorry for the length of this email. Before I go out, I want to shout out Kevin for being a metalhead. I am one myself. I played in metal bands all through my 20s. Hearing you on Jamie Jasta's podcast,
Oh yeah, Jamie Joslin, lead singer of Hatebreed. He had me on his show a couple years ago. I grew up on that band. Yeah.
Says hearing you on that podcast is what brought me to find out about ReelBlend.
Oh,
Shout
wow.
out to Jake for his love of Star Wars. I always appreciate you repping the wars. Shout out to Sean for showing people that you can fanboy over both Marvel and DC. And lastly, but not least, shout out to Gabe for keeping this crazy train on the rails every week. Take care and keep up the good work, boys. Your pal, Dan. That's fantastic.
Beautiful.
That
review.
is that
See?
review, man. Wow.
That's why I ask for reviews. They're very touching.
Yeah.
More
And what a
often than
great,
not.
what a great
was-
story given our conversation earlier. It was, talking about
wow.
theater going experience. Beautiful.
So great. A mom who's a projectionist? That's so badass. I think
Yes.
that's incredible. All right. Our next
Yeah.
premium episode is going to drop on Monday. Again, check the descriptions below to find out how you can sign up for it. Follow us on social media at Jake's Takes, at Kevin McCarthy TV, at Sean_O'Connell, at Gabe Kovach. And the show is at ReelBlend. We'll be back with a full episode next week. Until then, ladies and gentlemen,
Hockey pads and Oppenheimer.
Oppenheimer.
Hockenheimer.
Can't wait to have Chris say that.
Oh
Chris.
yeah, we're definitely not asking Chris to say
Chrissy,
that.
Chrissy,
yeah.
Chris.
We're
Oh, by the way,
definitely not
that's my
asking-
new thing now too. Is I'm going to demystify Nolan by just calling him Chris.
No,
Chris.
you're not.
No,
Find out what he's called.
not to him, but like on the show.
He's not Chris. He's never
Chris.
going to be Chris. It's Mr. Nolan.
That's
on
what
this podcast.
John David Washington called him.
Well, he's best. He worked with the guy. We don't know Christopher Nolan.
You didn't commit, Chris.
What would you call Stanley Kubrick? Stanley?
Stan?
We wouldn't call him
Stan.
that.
Call him Stan, yeah.
Oh yeah,
Stan
call him
the man.
Stan. Did you call
Or-
James Cameron Jim?
Steve Spielberg?
Stevie?
Spielberg,
Stevie
yeah.
Pooh?
Steve. They don't call him Steve.
Tommy
You think?
Tom.